if you see an opportunity and it looks great, take advantage of it and jump onto it. Don't think too hard about what's wrong and et cetera, et cetera. Maybe there are just great opportunities that do come along. Jump in and get on with it.
Welcome to Biz Stories Shared, where storytellers share their inspiration, motivation, some disappointments, and how they applied the lessons that led them to success. Stories are gifts. Listen as these gifts are shared. Now, here is your host, Charlotte Plott.
Hello, storytellers. This is Charlotte Plott, and I'm thrilled to bring you our guest today, Parviz Parvizi. Parviz, are you ready to be a storyteller?
Absolutely. I'm ready to clamor on with you.
Well, good. Parviz is the co-founder of Clammr, and that's spelled C-L-A-M-M-R. And it's a mobile app and platform making great audio more sociable and discoverable. Users are calling Clammr, which features audio clips of 18 seconds or less, the Instagram and Twitter of audio. So previously, Parviz worked at McKinsey & Company, Goldman Sachs, the FCC, and Mulvaney & Myers. He has advised top 5 global media companies and mobile carriers on strategy and growth. He is a founder of McKinsey's iConsumer research initiative on digital consumer behavior, authoring 3 of the firm's 10 most downloaded media sector knowledge documents. Parviz holds a Juris Doctor degree from Yale Law School and a bachelor's degree from Cornell. Well, Parviz, I have given our listeners just a little summary about you. So will you take a minute and tell us more about you personally so that we get to know you better, and then give us an overview of your business?
Sure. Charlotte, it's really a pleasure to be with you today. Thanks a lot for that introduction. So as you mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of Clammr, which is a lot of people are calling an audio Twitter, an audio Instagram. I think one of the interesting things for your listeners to maybe know about me is one of my traits that helped inspire the founding of Clammr, which is I'm a slow reader. And that's actually the source of how I really got into things that are in audio. So my co-founder and I, David, we met on the very first day of law school. You mentioned that I graduated from law school, and he's also a slow reader, which is ironic for somebody to go to law school and be a slow reader. So we kind of bonded over that, and we're also big self-learners. And so when you want to learn a lot and you're kind of slow at reading, you naturally gravitate toward audio. Certainly in our cases, we did. And so we often found that we were sharing things with each other. Audiobooks, where he would rip an audiobook and put it on Dropbox for me and tell me to go check out a certain quote or part. And I would share podcasts with him and likewise tee him up on the best moments. And it really came out of a conversation out of his forehead one day to say, why can't we kind of tweet these things at each other? Why can't we send these little audio gems to each other in a more efficient way? Because it seems pretty clunky for us to share in this manner. And so what I'm doing with Clammr and what we've developed is really something that came out of a place of personal behavior and a bit of personal need. It's sort of scratched an itch that we both had for ourselves in being able to share and grab the best little moments of audio as a way to then dive into something longer. So that's a little of some backstory on me and Clammr. And to share with your audience just a little more context, the way Clammr works is it's an app on the iPhone, but it's also available on the web, and it's an overall platform. So if somebody wants to use Clammr to listen, what they do is they just go and grab a channel on there, for example, headline news or storytelling podcasts or business podcasts, and they hit play. And once they hit play, they get a stream of these short audio clips. They're maximum of 18 seconds. They just come one after the other. And you can just listen to those on their own, and they can often be very insightful. Like, for example, there's some great business quotes and inspirational quotes in there. But also, you can actually hit a button a hear more button, or if you have your headphones on and you're walking around, you just double click on the microphone and that'll launch a longer audio piece. So
Oh,
it's actually a way to make audio easier to discover and browse. One of the challenges with audio is it's this really big unit size. It's often chunked into these
yeah.
long podcasts or audiobooks. And so when somebody engages with a podcast and they like it, they're often hooked. And same with things like audiobooks. But there's a really high barrier to initial discovery because you have to really be committed to engage in this long thing. So we thought, gee, if you can actually boil down the best parts of longer audio into these short snippets, that lets people do what they do with visual media, which is, often you're going through a website or a newspaper or something like that, and you're browsing the headlines real quick, and then you dive into something. We said if you actually shrink the audio down, you can also make it really browsable and discoverable. And those little bits are also shareable. So they can be posted to Facebook and Twitter. And a lot of podcasters have really started to use Clammr for that reason as a way to actually post little highlights and intros and trailers for their podcasts on Facebook, on Twitter, to introduce new audiences. And even their fans are now creating these little short snippets. When they hear a moment they like, they just hit a Clammr button, which we can go into later, some of the mechanics of that, to share out their favorite moments. And it always has a link back to the full podcast.
It has a link back to it also.
That's right. That's one of the really big insights for us. We didn't want these audio pieces just floating around without really any context.
Sure.
And really, what podcasters have found really interesting and helpful is each of these clips always comes with a link attached to it, a more button that the user can use to launch the full episode. And depending on who the creator is and what they want to do, it also actually has a link to a website as well for the podcaster. So it's a form of what we call social lead generation for podcasts and other great audio. It's a way to generate leads through social media instead of simply a podcast. Often you have folks in audio, especially podcasters, they're the only one marketing and promoting their show.
Right.
And they're out there on their own. They have to do all the hard work of scheduling guests, all the hard work of making the thing, and then they're alone promoting it. And so we said, why don't we actually turn your listeners into your biggest marketers by giving you and them a set of tools that let them actually grab these little moments. And when they grab those moments, those come with links. And so when somebody's, for example, Charlotte, on your website now, in your case, you're using this really great WordPress plugin called Simple Podcast Press by
Right.
Annie Mura. And that's just an awesome player. And when somebody's on your website and they play an episode, underneath that now, because Simple Podcast Press was one of the very first adopters of some of the Clammr technology, there's a button there that says Clammr it. So when they hear something that captures their attention, they hit that Clammr it button, and that'll pop up a little wave form. It's like a little audio wave that shows exactly what they were listening to. And they can adjust that if they want. Just like, when you hit the Facebook button, you can adjust the text that comes with it. So they can adjust the wave, they can adjust the title, and then they have to post it. And it gets posted to either Facebook or Twitter or both. So they're actually grabbing their favorite moments and sharing that out with the world. So it's pretty neat. And we've even seen this stuff starting to slip into people's vocabulary, where some of the earliest Clammr users who are podcasters, in the middle of their show, they'll say, "Oh, that was a Clammr worthy moment," or "Yeah, I got to Clammr that one." They start kind of thinking in those terms, these
Right.
little great little gems and sound bites.
Well, as we talked about initially, I've invited you to do a clamor for us so that we can see how you do it, what the results are. So thank you for agreeing to do that. That'll be
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll post it. I'll send you the link. And there are a few options on how folks can make clamors, just so your listeners know, because many of them may be interested, especially even for their own businesses. Folks who are using podcasts as a form of marketing. One is the player on your site can have a Clammr button on it. So if you have simple podcast press, or we actually have a WordPress plugin that Blueberry is going to be integrating into their PowerPress.
Okay.
So that'll be a setting in PowerPress, and you can always download it directly. And then most of the major hosting companies now, we're working with them to have this Clammr button on their players as well. So one is if they come to your website, they can just Clammr an episode straight off of the audio player. Second is they can just go to clammr.com and then hit the record button there and actually look up any podcast and then pull the episode and then just grab the snippet from that. And then third, we have an iPhone app that's super convenient and pretty slick. And so folks can also just simply use the record function there to look up a podcast that's on their phone and then create the clip.
Oh my goodness. Well, that was pretty ingenious. Thank goodness that you two were slow readers.
Exactly.
It's one of those blessings that we don't expect to turn into results like you've produced.
It's funny, often, there's this, often our greatest weaknesses are our greatest strengths, and vice versa.
Right.
That's definitely been the case for David and me.
Oh, well, I'm really happy for both of you and me and our listeners. That's great. Well, we like to start every show with our guest's favorite quote. So, would you tell us what your favorite quote is and how you apply it to your everyday thinking?
Yeah. So I have a maxim that I've always loved, and it's got multiple facets. It's know thyself, or know yourself, and you see that actually in a lot of across multiple cultures. It's obviously famous from Apollo's temple with Greeks, some of Plato's dialogues, but you see it kind of as something that comes up in different religious, philosophical, and other contexts. And there are a couple ways to interpret it, I think. Even the Art of War had it. One is sort of more self-reflection, just know who you are, kind of a thing.
Right.
I think there's a second interpretation that's really resonating with me, which is one that has to do more with humility. So know thyself being know your place in the world, and it's a big world, and know your place in that you're one small part of it. And how that's played out for me is I take it as a statement about patience and really appreciating the process that you're in, rather than exclusively thinking about kind of end goals of success. And so that's something that has resonated with me as often building anything can be a long road, and you have ups and downs. And I think having a level of humility helps go through those ups and downs. And so that mantra is one that has resonated with me for that reason. And so I think of that on a regular basis.
I see that you have done, I mean, I can tell you've done a lot of reflection on that, and I wouldn't have added the word humility with it, but that really does add so much to that mantra when you talked about the humility and this being such a big world, and only, I think you said, focusing on our goals. We really get carried away focusing on our goals, and so I really appreciate your explanation of that. Thank you. That was very, very insightful. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, along the way of your entrepreneurial journey, you've probably had some instances where you didn't get the results that you set out to have. So would you tell us that story, and most importantly, the lessons that you learned?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many stories, and I mean, really, I think on a daily basis, I go to sleep. I'm a night person, so I go to sleep at night and I write my list of things that I need to do the next day.
Okay.
That's how I work best. And so every day I have a set of things that I didn't live up to. But I think as a distinct story, actually, David and I, we go back a very long way together, and we've worked on a lot of things together. And the first thing we did together was actually in law school. We started a winter hat business for fun, and it was such a blast. It was, I had lived in Russia before coming to law school. I'd been working there, and I went skiing in the Caucasus Mountains, and they had these hats called papahas. And these papahas were these giant hats with the hair pulled out. It looked like a giant cotton ball. And I, of course, bought one. I thought it was super cool. And I brought it back and I went skiing with it with friends from law school. And we were going up and I'd always get a lot of comments. And so we were going up the chairlift and we said, hey, we should totally make these. It would be really fun. And we'll learn a lot from it. We'll figure out how to source these in China. We'll figure out how to sell them. It'll be a blast. So
Wow.
we did that. And so the what was a failure about it was that we put all of this work into the product and just figuring that out because we had no clue. I mean, we had classes and whatnot, so we were really doing this on the side. We had no clue how to make a hat or even really how to even start with things like designs. And so, we went around the Northeast. Turns out there are no hat manufacturers left really in America. And so we
Oh,
found the one left in the Northeast, and they said, yeah, you need to order, 10,000 of these for this to be interesting for us.
oh
And so,
dear.
we then we figured out a way to source them from China, and that was a really interesting experience. So we spent all this time on the product, all this time on just the basic setup. And what we didn't do, it's like we put in this 95% of the effort into the business, and we didn't think through, well, how exactly are we going to sell these things
Oh,
in a scalable fashion? Um, and it's as if we ran a marathon and only got to the starting line of the real marathon. And the real marathon is, well, how do you actually market? Um, who truly is your customer, et cetera.
right.
So that was a bit of a bonehead move on our parts. Now we ended up selling a bunch and making some money was because it's hard not to because the margins were good and these are simple products. But
Right.
um, you know, what I took away from that, so we did things like we went door to door to ski shops and sold them to a bunch of ski shops. We set up a little bit of a program on the slopes to sell them.
Oh,
But I think what I took away, and we graduated and we went and got good jobs after that. But why something like that really ended up just being a hobby business was because we didn't think structurally about the channels in the industry. Like we figured out really late in the game that oh yeah, there's this annual ski show where a lot of the retail is
oh,
sold. Just these kind of really obvious things,
mm-hmm.
and we were more emotionally invested with what a fun product it was,
Right.
and not really thinking hard about things like either direct channels or indirect channels. Like there's a whole network of people who sell to ski shops that we could have leveraged, et cetera. So I think that was a really uh, cheap lesson in the sense that it was with our side time and with something that didn't actually, it was an investment of time, but actually money wise wasn't a loss. But it was definitely a good eye opener of when you want to create something that's product driven, you really should think it through to the end state and think through at a very practical, detailed level. How is it that you're actually going to sell this thing? And go and spend the time with those channels to validate them before taking the time to actually build or make something.
Well, you used a word in there that I think I know for myself. You used the word emotional. We'd get emotionally tied into
Mm.
the fun of it, the creativity, and the activity, and so I can see that just sounded like a really fun project that you had, and you did make money.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. It's just as I reflected on it as a business set of lessons, it was that was a really big takeaway for me of wow, if I was invested in this in a way where it mattered for my life, like if I had chosen to make that my entrepreneurial venture, that would have been a really bad outcome. Like, just to make a little bit of money,
Right.
it wasn't enough to live, So it was great to learn that lesson. And I pick up those kinds of lessons every time, we do something together. So
Right. Well, that was a great story. Thank you for sharing that. And it really you didn't really fail and you learned a lot and because of that you still have the courage to take action and succeed in other areas and so that helps us to learn those lessons from without us having to go through it. We can hear
Yeah.
your story. So really, thank you. Thank you for that. It was a great story too. Do you still have one of the hats?
I do, of course, I have several, and I get requests from friends all the time who
Sure.
are like, "Hey, do you have?" I just shipped one to a friend in San Francisco a few weeks ago. He said, "Hey, do you have one of those papas anymore? Do you have any of those?" So I actually it was funny because we both went and got these kind of corporate jobs when we graduated, and pay loans and whatnot, and we made a promise to ourselves that we would one day go and resurrect the papajas because it was so much. Those were so much fun, I have to say, on the slopes and just
Oh,
walking around with them. It was a
right.
blast. So
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine that that was. And people noticed you for sure.
totally.
Well, what I want to do now is to talk about a time in your journey when you had an aha moment, when you
Mhm.
became aware of the new path that you wanted to travel. So, will you take us to that time when you had that light bulb go off and take us through the steps that you took to turn that idea into success?
Well, I started with part of. I think I can point to Clammr, and I started with part of the aha moment of it came from this place of personal behavior um, in how we were sharing audio with each other and that being inefficient.
Right.
Um, I think how we then took that initial idea and again with any new idea you get to this euphoric moment where you're very excited about it, but in this case we said why don't we be a little bit more methodical in vetting this, because this is for real now. This isn't when we're just as something for fun between reading the books or whatever. And so we what we did with Clammr is we went through a process of validating it. And so the very first thing we did after we had a conversation is we actually each created a series of short audio clips for each other. So, Dave went and created a series of 30, 40 of them. For me, I created a set for him. We put them on Dropbox and we just listened to them and said, would this be a good experience just to hear these short clips? Is it too jarring? And we actually both found it surprisingly. We weren't sure how we'd think about it. We thought it was neat, but we didn't really know. And we both actually came away saying this is actually a great listening experience. And so we then went and shared that set with a close in set of 20 or so folks who we knew just to get feedback from them,
Oh,
and see. And that was with zero cost, right? So without building anything, without at all spending any money, we just said, let's just do a super simple prototype of the experience and see what it's like. Um, Once we did that and we got a lot of positive feedback, we then said, okay, let's start pulling a bit of a team together. And we we actually, as part of building out the initial app, and when it was in its very earliest days of beta, we actually, or I should say alpha, um, we recruited a set of folks who found audio interesting and who we wanted to just listen to the experience and use the app in its earliest form. And one thing we did is we made sure to have that group be a diverse one. Our initial founding team was male, and so one thing we went out of our way to do was make sure that there were an overweighted number of females in the group that was our set of early beta testers. And the other thing we did is we made sure we didn't actually know any of those people, because while those first 20 people who listened to what we shared with them were helpful, they were people we knew, and we knew they'd have these kind of cognitive biases, to want to be encouraging or whatever. And we wanted unvarnished feedback. So we built feedback and validation into our development process quite early.
okay.
And so we went step by step through that process. And then the other thing we did was we invested as part of our launch. We went to a podcast conference and we really invested time to go pretty native with the audio community. In the music community, we embedded at the Berklee College of Music in Boston,
Wow.
where we were actually part of one of their classes where they assigned students to us. And then with podcasters, we really just went in a pretty just kind of in a humble way and introduced ourselves and said, well, look, we're new to this space. We're not trying to come in saying we have the answers. Here's our current hypothesis and what we've developed. What would be useful to you? What did we get wrong? And so we really tried to embed and go native with the communities that we thought this could resonate most with. And we got a ton of great feedback that's been really helpful for some of our development as part of that.
That sounds like a brilliant process that you went through. And what really struck me was when you asked people, what did we get wrong? Because usually, for me anyway, I'm so excited about something, I know everybody's going to love it.
Right. Sure.
But asking that honest question, what did we get wrong? You got some real important feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we get feedback from users, somebody recently wrote a little bit, somewhat apologetically, to complain about something, and we wrote back and said, actually, this is gold because you have a lot of, at least a lot of people do, certainly I do, and the team does. I think it's natural to have this confirmation bias in your thinking, which is you have this bias toward orienting toward evidence that confirms your thinking. And that can be harmful when you're in your earliest days in particular and really making these decisions about where to take the product and what to do with it. If you anchor on the confirming evidence, but that's not representative of the broader community, that can take you pretty out of whack. So we really tried to build that in early to get the feedback, and we're always still doing that today.
Oh, that's brilliant. You said another word in there and I've forgotten it. I'm going to have to clamor it.
Absolutely.
So these real life experiences that you've shared, they help us to learn how to take the different facets of in our life and business, and it helps us to keep growing. And now I'm going to ask you to bring us to the present time and to share your proudest entrepreneurial moment.
Oh boy. Well, for sure, because we were in development for months with Clammr. Um, Seeing the very first users of Clammr and posting social media
Oh,
and sending comments, and we were just sitting up, watching the screen kind of tick 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 tick
wow.
with users, and that was the proudest moment because you know taking the time to build something, get feedback, and then see truly unknown random people engaging and it making a difference for them was awesome. So that's definitely the proudest moment.
Oh, I can see that that would be.
Yep.
Well, Parvis, the stories that you've shared, the listeners really love to hear them, how you're growing and making your business a success, because it inspires us to try and do the same thing. So, would you please tell us one more thing that is really exciting you in your business right now?
Yeah. So one thing that's really exciting, and this comes um, taking a step back and looking at some of the patterns in our business. So what we saw, we launched late spring, early summer, and we saw that the people who were most obsessed with Clammr were audio creators, and they were coming back at a rate of 70+% after over 2 months, which in the
Wow.
world of apps is very, very high. So if you're an app and somebody shows up on day one, or 100 people show up on day one, and then day 60, day 90, 70 plus of those 100 are showing up, that is ridiculous. That's you're clearly resonating with somebody in that case. And so we saw that these creators were really retaining and using the app, and we saw that they were using the app to create these clips to share on social media. And so one of our takeaways, and then we talked to folks about that. We kind of quizzed folks, had individual conversations with users, and one of the obvious takeaways was that we should really make Clammr more available where people are spending their time. We should actually ride that little lesson that we're seeing here about creators that's really resonating with them. So, rather than just having Clammr available in an app that somebody has to download, we said, great, let's make the web tools really easy. So anybody can just go to our website. But that alone wasn't enough. So the thing that's really exciting that we're doing now is we've gone and really pulled together the whole audio ecosystem and offered up this Clammr sharing tool, this little Clammr button, as something that's embedded inside of audio players,
Right.
as well as hosting companies. And we've had really great success. We're right in the middle of that. But pretty much all the major hosting companies and all the major audio players at this point have adopted this Clammr button and either have it in market, which Hanny was, he owns his company, and so he can be very aggressive in moving fast. So he
Right.
did it immediately, and others are working through it right now. And so that's the thing that's got me most excited, um, that we're able to actually add this social layer, this sharing layer to the audio experience in a way that hasn't really existed before. So super pumped about that.
Oh, I can see why, because don't you say that it's like the Instagram and Twitter of audio?
Right, right, yeah. And so the same way, especially I think Twitter is a good example where folks often are using Twitter as a bit of a lead-in for something, and then you click on it, whether it's headline news or whatever. We think Clammr can play that same role. The one thing that we made as a tweak is, a Twitter started in the earliest days of social networks, but today we have a lot of social networks already.
Right.
And so we said instead of just being like an island on its own, that Twitter's like its own destination, let's take advantage of the fact that these social networks already exist. And let's make Clammr something that you can use on its own, but also is an open platform. So everything that you Clammr automatically gets posted to Facebook and Twitter at the same time. And that's pretty neat as a value proposition for audio creators, because now it takes their audio and makes it available on Twitter, on Facebook in a way that really hasn't been able to be made available in the past.
Well, it certainly is exciting. And you're going to do a clamor sometime during this little interview?
Yeah, we can. Well, what I'll do, I know we don't have a video screen share, um, but what I can do is just walk the audience and yourself through what I'm doing on my screen.
Okay.
And I think that'll be pretty neat. So I'll just go to bizstorieshared.com,
Yeah.
your website, and I'm going to actually go to, one of the recent episodes that you have. Uh, let's go for, I don't know. I thought let's say Dr. Karen Jacobson. So
Perfect.
who had the car accident,
Yes.
which is a really interesting story. So I'll click on that one, and now I go to the landing page for that episode. And I see on that landing page you've got this beautiful player where you can just, it says listen to the episode below. So I'm going to hit play. Can you hear that audio, by the way?
Just barely.
Okay. Um, so I'll let it play for a while. So, okay, I'm about 40 seconds in. All right, great. So what I did is I went in about 50 seconds or so, found a good spot that was a nice intro for that episode, and I just hit the Clammr It button that was underneath your player. So you have buttons that say download and iTunes, and I hit the one that said Clammr It. And now that grabbed an 18-second snippet that was basically what I was just hearing. So I'm going to go and I can actually press the play button to preview it and make sure it's like a piece that makes sense. And what I'll do is I'll actually modify it a little bit. I'll say, you know what, let's make it from 39 seconds in to about 54 seconds in. I'll play that again as a preview.
Okay.
I'm listening to the preview here. Okay, I'll modify the end of it a little bit. Cool. Great. So now I'm going to just hit review. It's going to show me the title and her image and the description, all of which I could modify if I want. And then I'm going to just choose to post it and hit done. And it's going to have me, cool. It's going to have me just pick Facebook or Twitter here. So I'll pick both.
Okay.
And I'll post them. Take a second. And it should be up. It is up.
Oh my
So
goodness.
if you are on your computer and able to multitask a bit, if you go to Twitter, Charlotte, and just go to the Clammr page there, I think you'll be able to see the Clammr that I posted just now. And then search for @Clammr app just to go to our our landing page there.
Okay. Now I'm in Twitter.
Cool.
And I see a Clammr.
Hit the tab that says live on the results. Do you see it on the results it says top live accounts and photos?
Oh, yes. Top live. Click on
Hit
live.
live.
Okay. Oh, there she is.
Do you see that?
I do.
And it's a nice, beautiful, big image
It's
with a
beautiful.
big play button. So it's a nice call to action. And if you hit that play button.
Okay, I will. I
Yep.
did.
Are you ready to be a storyteller? Yes, I am, Sean.
Yeah. Now, see how at the bottom it says hear more?
Dr. Karen Jacobson.
So that's going to let
Yes.
the audience launch the whole podcast right there.
Oh.
So the idea is there are a lot of people who don't even know what a podcast is.
I know.
And so this is helping you meet them where they actually spend their time. It's helping you actually meet them on the social space where they're spending their time. Now, once they get hooked, they'll come to your website, and we actually put a link to your website right there underneath where it says 038 story of how Karen Jacobson.
Yes.
So they'll be able to get to your website through that
link.
My
goodness.
So now, you can obviously create these Clammrs, and we definitely suggest that you do, because it's not hard at all. For any given show, there'll probably be a few moments that are great moments, but also your audience can do it, just as a matter of habit for things that they love and they want to share.
Right. Well, and the interview guest will certainly want to use this.
For sure. And these things can be created and made into playlists. So, for example, Karen could have her 5 greatest gems from that interview as a playable playlist. And that's a pretty neat experience, actually. Wisdom from Karen in 5 quick nuggets. And that's pretty neat. So
that's very neat. Oh, you're a genius. You're a genius. I love it.
So glad to hear it. And I really do hope it's helpful for you and also your listeners.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask you, what's the best business advice you ever received? I just got my best business advice.
So nice of you to say that. Yeah, I thought about this one. I've gotten so much great advice. Probably this one really practical one of don't look a gift horse in the mouth is one that I've always loved, that one of my college advisors gave me, which is don't look a gift horse in the mouth. It wasn't in a business context, but I think it applies in business too, which is I tend to interpret it in a broader way of if you see an opportunity and it looks great, take advantage of it and jump onto it. Don't think too hard about what's wrong and et cetera, et cetera. Maybe there are just great opportunities that do come along. Jump in and get on with it.
Well, I think you did a good interpretation of that quote when you slow readers came up with Clammr. That was excellent. Well, now I'm going to ask you to share some specific ways that show how you achieved becoming such a successful entrepreneur, and ask you what's the vision of the future of your business.
Yeah, so the vision is simple for Clammr, which is we want to have the general population be able to discover all of the great audio that's out there through the tools that Clammr provides. So the future of Clammr we see is really providing a social layer for audio. So we see people when they're on social media consuming great stuff like your podcast and other podcasts in the same way that they're consuming video and news articles and instead being exposed to great audio as well.
Right. And is it similar if you were like I read Kindle and
Mhm.
I underline and get the little highlights in there. So
Yeah,
Clammr is just a way to save what you
yep,
want to for future reference. And that's kind of
exactly.
simplistic, but
Yeah, well, it's a great way to put it. And what we actually do, if you're using the true platform like the Clammr app, actually we have a like button there. And anytime you hear a Clammr, if you like it, for example, if it's a great news item, or we even have these little food recipes that people put up, these 18-second quick recipes that have a link to a longer one. Anytime you hit a like button against one of those, we actually send you a daily email digest of everything that you liked. And so
really,
you actually, yeah, and that comes with a link to the full audio, a link to the site, so you can reference that. So very much that's a good analogy that you put up there.
wow, that'll be really helpful. Well, Parvis, can you share one of your personal habits that you strongly believe contributes to your success?
Yeah, I think one of my habits that really contributes to my happiness is I, I I I like to make space for uh, for me to get how the way I put it is random inputs. So even if I'm really heads down working on Clammr, I make sure I make space to engage in other sources of input for myself,
Mm,
knowledge
mm-hmm.
that have nothing to do with entrepreneurship
Right.
or audio. Um, and why that's helpful for me is I always have a feeling that if I'm able to broaden my frame of reference, if I'm able to get inputs from entirely different modes of thinking and entirely different areas of thinking, um, like I'm right now going through an audiobook on the history of water. I just thought it was interesting. And I always make sure I bake that in. It actually helps me be more creative because I have more touch points to reference a problem that I'm grappling with. Uh, and more lenses to use. And that's been helpful for me time and again. It's a long-term investment in myself to make sure that I expose myself to new knowledge and new ways of thinking that are not practically useful to what I'm doing on a given day.
Well, it might not seem like it's practical and useful on a given day, but it doesn't all that information get stored in there and it pops up in a way that you wouldn't have expected it, and there's another aha for you.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely the source of the shower moments and the aha moments that are,
Right.
often the kind of little sparks.
Yeah, that's a very good habit for you to have, and me too, and all of us.
Sure.
Well, Parvis, do you have an internet resource to share with our listeners that helps your efficiency, like Evernote or another app besides Clammr and Storytellers? You will find the links to these sites in the show notes of today's episode at bizstoryshare.com/Parvis Parvizi. And
Yeah,
it's going to be a Clammr somewhere in there too.
for sure. Um, Yeah, certainly Evernote. I've been actually using Evernote more and more and transitioning from the Notes app, which I used for a long time, but I've gotten more on the Evernote bandwagon. Um, uh, ways I've used. I've gotten a lot of people use it. I think it's superior to things like Google Maps, so it helps me if I'm driving around get the most efficient route. But the things that are the efficiency items for me go to things that help me with my knowledge. So Clammr, yeah, it really does. I mean, not to just talk my own book there, but it it really is a way for me to get access to. I just can't go through a lot of different podcasts and constantly be searching. So if I just hit the top storytelling podcast channel, I just get this reel of great little snippets from storytelling podcasts and I get exposed to something new that I haven't heard of before. And that's been great. And then certainly Audible and certainly The Economist, they have an awesome app that plays the full Economist in audio every week. And that thing's just great for catching up on world news when I'm running. And so sources like that, those three, Clammr, Audible, Economist app, those are ones that really help me make good use of my time.
Those are very good ones. Thank you for sharing those.
Sure.
And then along that line, do you have just one book that you could recommend to our listeners?
Sure. Look, there are of course the classics that I think for anyone in the business world, like Strunk and White for writing, Getting to Yes, Please Understand Me for kind of Myers-Briggs type stuff. But a recent one that I've really liked is To Sell is Human by
Ah,
Daniel Pink.
mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really thoughtful because it brought in a lot of this research around positive psychology that I've always been found fascinating and intuitively a lot of it seems to make sense. And it made it practical for purposes of how you influence people. And he has this whole concept of the new ABC. So instead of always be selling, it's this, it's this other kind of acronym that he tends to use, which is uh, attunement, buoyancy, and the C is clarity. So
Oh,
I thought that was really insightful and a good recent book. So
yes. That is a very good one. So thanks for sharing that.
sure.
So now I'm just going to say that I really truly have enjoyed listening to your journey and the stories that you've shared, and I'm going to definitely use Clammr. I can hardly wait. I just really have enjoyed listening to your journey and the stories that you've shared. So will you share one more time how we can get in touch with you and any other resources that you want us to have, and then we'll say goodbye.
Sure thing. So we're on Twitter at Clammr App, ClammrApp. Uh, you know, info at clammr.com goes to me and one of my other co-founders. So you can always reach us by email. We have for power users a user guide at userguide.clammr.com. Pretty good YouTube channel with a lot of how-to videos. We're an early new company, and so we're all in, and we're always responsive to feedback, and we'd love to hear from everyone in the audience. And so, clamor on, Charlotte.
Clamor on. Thank you so much. I know that it is really going to help me sharing all of the wonderful guests that I have. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for being so generous with your time and your experiences and your expertise. Okay, listeners, remember that you can find the links to these resources and everything that we've been chatting about in today's episode by going to bizstorieshared.com Parviz Parvizi. Thank you again, and goodbye, Parvis.
Goodbye, Charlotte. Clamor on.
Clamor on. Give the storyteller some love. Go to bizstorieshared.com, click on the iTunes button, and give a 5-star review. Thanks.